to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Haas from nichepursuits.com. I also own a little tool called Longtail Pro. If you want to check it out at longtailpro.com. Perrin, I thought I'd just throw in that little infomercial for Longtail Pro. I haven't been doing that.
Yeah, we were talking before the call, should we change it up? I think we're just afraid of being boring. Maybe we are boring. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? If people are listening to us still, they know what they're going to get. We're pretty much, we're boring guys. We just like to talk about business, I guess.
Yep.
And we're afraid our jokes that we might tell won't come off quite right, so...
Maybe we're too humble, though, we always think, we are continually surprised that people listen to us.
It's true. People keep listening, and I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we do.
Perrin and I have both mentioned several times, we're pretty much introverted people. We enjoy sitting at the computer, typing things out, and trying to conquer the internet behind the curtain. We're not the usual guys that are in front of the microphone, so doing the podcast is a little bit different for us, I guess, and so maybe that's part of it. We just want to say our bit, and we want to have good content, and just go from there. So hopefully people enjoy it. But Perrin, welcome to the show as usual. It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
No interview today with a guest, but we have a topic that we want to cover that is very important. A lot of people have asked about how we manage our writers effectively. And it's a very important topic because just about any web property that you create, or for any website to be successful, it needs to have great content. I mean, that is an ingredient for just about every website out there, right? And so it's a topic that, if you're not writing your own content, you need to have the ability to find, hire, and manage great writers. And so that's what we're going to dig into today. Hopefully you find some value there. So let's jump right into it. So Perrin basically wrote a post on nichepursuits.com just a couple of days ago to talk about the process of how we manage our writers. And so I'm going to turn it over a little bit to Perrin, since these are mostly his thoughts, and we're going to follow this blog post for the most part. And then we'll just have a discussion on it. So, Perrin, why don't you take it away?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think maybe the first thing we should talk about is something that I didn't really cover in the blog post, and that is the business case for why you should be investing in writing in the first place. Because most of our audiences are people who, don't have massive budgets, and they are building web properties on a small or medium budget, and when you're doing that, you really want to maximize your ROI. And so I think it pays to talk about why really fantastic writing can maximize your ROI for those folks who are building websites on a smaller or medium budget, because I really didn't get into that in the blog post, and I think that's what people are most interested in. So I guess the first thing I'll say is that, the SEO web or landscape is changing quite a bit. A few years ago, you could buy any old content from Odesk or Textbroker or wherever, and as long as it had the keyword in the H1 tag and a couple of times throughout the text, you could throw out 50 pages and pay $5 per article and rank pretty well and make some good money. But with everything else, that part of a website is moving away from low quality and into high quality, and Google is starting to reward websites for high quality, especially as the algorithm gets better at detecting quality signals like readability and that type of thing. So it's much, much more important now. And this is something we covered in the comments too, because some people were saying, including one of my good friends who I talk with every week about SEO, that content still doesn't matter that much. But we've seen lots of examples to the contrary about how great content can make you much, much more money. And an easy example is my own site, I think, which is a penny shaved. And at its core, A Penny Shaved is just a product review site, you know? I mean, I've started adding lots of other things since the penalty, but at its core, we're just talking about shaving products, you know?
Right.
But I hired one of the best possible writers I could, or I wrote that content myself. And one of the things that A Penny Shaved does better than any of the niche sites that I've seen, and I'm sure there are some out there that are better than me, but one of the things that it does really well is that it keeps people on the page and it gets people looking at multiple pages on the site. And the reason it does that is because the writing is absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a critical point, is once you get people on your site viewing additional pages and staying longer, that's a signal for Google, right?
Yeah, and they're engaging with me. So it's not just like, hey, this razor is great. I hired a writer who could write my articles as if they were like Old Spice commercials. So he's like funny and witty and dry and understands the audience very, very well. And so when people are reading about a razor, they are engaged enough that they want to like leave a comment or tweet it or share it on Facebook. And I have plenty of those things happening on that site. And all of that leads to a much higher profit margin than I might otherwise have. I think comparatively, A Penny Shave's profits are really pretty good. I think before the penalty, I was approaching $4,000 a month. And it wasn't because I had a lot more content. You know, I was around $3,000 a month with still like 30 pages of content or so.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, of course, other reasons for that. Like I happened to land on a good market that was growing quickly, and it's kind of coming back in popularity overall. And there are other related blogs and businesses that are gaining popularity. But if I was going to pick one factor that I think contributed most, it would certainly be the writing. So there's always a really great business case for writing. And we've seen lots of our friends do really, really well with really fantastic writing. So like a couple of our readers, and we've mentioned this before, are doing really well with no links and content only. Gail Breton, who we had on the podcast, is creating authority sites and promoting them only using really, really great content written by experts who he's hiring. And Brian Dean at Backlinko is also promoting sites using what he's now calling the skyscraper method, which is a very content-centered strategy. And none of that works if you are not producing great content on your blog. The problem, of course, is that it's tough to do that by yourself. You know,
It is.
Most people are not professional writers. For most people, a really long, great blog post is going to take maybe even days, you know? And so when you start spending that much time on content, your return on your time can suffer. So the business case for writing is, you know, if you hire a great writer who can produce really good content fast, and you can keep them happy enough to like want to work with you for a long time, you free up a lot more of your time. Your blog can grow on its own, and because of those things, your ROI can, you know, drastically increase.
Yeah, and we're going to jump a little bit into how to manage and keep writers happy and motivated here in a second, but I do want to echo your point, the importance of the business case, and a little bit to discuss the mind shift, if you will, because there's two definite mindsets when it comes to building a business online. There's the mindset that we are talking about, building out a large authoritative website that people come to and enjoy and they want to share and they look to it for great content. You know, there's that mindset where you're just trying to produce the best content possible for your niche. And then there's the other mindset that very much still exists that I'll call sort of the black hat SEO, the black hat market, where they're just trying to do everything they can using shady tactics or not to rank a website in Google. And so there's that strong mindset. And so you need to make the distinctive decision of what camp you're in. You know, are you just going after cheap, keyword-rich content, or, you know, black hat methods, whatever that may be? And you may still tell yourself, hey, I'm writing great content, but really you're just outsourcing as cheap as you possibly can and
Right.
putting up as much content as you can? Or are you deciding to build out a quality website that people actually want to go to? So, that's sort of the distinction. Once you decide that, hey, I want to build a property that I'm excited to share with family and friends, and I want it to be a long-term thing that I work on for, years to come, or I want to build it into something that somebody could buy out eventually. Once you make that decision, you need to know how to manage your writers effectively.
Yeah, totally. And I think we should mention that that's the camp that we are in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have totally crossed over to creating long-term businesses, and we have plenty of colleagues that are just outsourcing really, really cheap content. Our view is that is, just a sacrifice that contributes to a shorter lifespan for whatever website you happen to be working on. So, as we're starting to build these websites that we are treating more like actual full-fledged businesses that we hope will last, a decade or more, we want everything to be quality, and the content is one of the biggest parts of that.
Yeah, and I want to jump in with one other thought that I've had recently.
Yeah.
When I look at, I see other people on other websites that are still saying, build out as many niche sites as possible. And, I've even said it's been probably 3 years almost since I stopped building out lots of websites. I mean, 10 in a month type of thing.
Right.
It's been a long time since I've done that, but there's still people out there sort of, I don't know about that fast, but still promoting that method, that black hat method of build out as much websites as possible, use any link building tactic possible. And when you look at the business case overall for both of these camps, the sort of black hat versus the authoritative sites. The smaller niche site, the churn and burn sites, I guess is the term that I want to use. Let's think about the potential for that business for a second. What's the biggest possible business you could build with that? If you look at everybody, either blogging or sharing their income, almost nobody is making over $10,000 a month with those types of sites. It's very rare, very rare. In fact, can you even I'm trying to think of even one person that at least reports income of over $10,000 a month with those churn and burn websites. I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, I mean, we know people who do that stuff and make that much money, but not with the actual niche sites.
Right. Yep, that's true. That's right. They make money elsewhere. And so it really, and I'm telling you, I've been in this business. It's a lot of work. You build up a website and then it gets penalized 6 months later or whatever. And so you're constantly trying to build up, and eventually you hope to get ahead of the game. And there's some money to be made there, but if you're making $4,000 or $5,000 a month, you are doing really, really well for that business model. Extremely well. You're in probably the top, 5% of all people building these churn and burn websites. You really are.
Yeah.
And if you hit 10,000, you're probably in the top 1%.
Yep.
I'm just thinking of people listening to this. Oh, but I know so-and-so from the Warrior Forum that says they're doing this. There's always going to be a guy or two saying they're making crazy money, but most of the time it's not true. And if it is true, they're the huge exception to the rule. Huge exception. Now, let's think about, on the other hand, what's the upside potential of building a real business, a real property that people want to go to? Sky's the limit, right? I mean, $10,000 a month is not a big deal for a real website.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, and to give you an idea, and I hope you won't kill me, but he shared his income when he was on the podcast. I was talking to Gail Breton the other day. When he was on the podcast, what was Health Ambition making? I think $10,000.
Yeah, he said over 5 figures. He didn't give the exact number, but over 10,000 a month. Yeah.
Yeah. Last time I talked to him is about that, and he's increased that by almost 50%, and since he's been on our podcast.
It's crazy.
And you can't do that with small niche sites. But it's much easier to do if you have a web property that's growing.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to get crazy here. I mean, even $15,000 a month is not that much for some of these sites. I mean,
Sure.
there's other sites, and I didn't come in prepared with a list, but think about the sites that are out there. There's companies that are publicly traded, on the NASDAQ. There's huge companies that really all they're doing, about.com and other content websites. They're just huge authoritative websites. So the idea that you can make $1 million in a year, that's not out of the question either. In fact, survivallife.com that Ryan Dice runs, that makes over $1 million a month.
Yep.
That's just one example, and there's tons of websites doing this. So as fun as churn and burn websites are, the upper income potential is so minuscule compared to what can happen if you build a real business online.
Yeah, and the point of that in regards to writing is that I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that authority just means lots and lots of content.
True.
But authority means much more than just volume of content.
Right.
Authority means quality. You have to be able to produce content that establishes you as not even necessarily an expert, but as somebody who knows what they're talking about and at least has a distinctive voice and a distinctive perspective in that market. Because people understand that not everybody's going to be an expert. But if you're going to be somebody who people like to read or listen to or watch or whatever, you can still carve out a niche in a very big market and establish, quote unquote, authority website. So the content is a really important part of the authority site. And I think I also want to make the point too that the reason we wrote this post is because we also want to get across that you can still automate this to a really large degree. The appeal of outsourcing and going to Elance is throwing down some money and getting an article back and posting that on your site. So one of the points of this article too is that even if you're creating an authority site, you can still automate it. You just have to find a good writer and manage them effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. So let's start to jump into some of the tactics, here. And you asked the question, or you made the statement in the article here of why I almost never use content services. Mm-hmm. So why not? Why not use the Text Broker and the Elance and the Odesk that you all mentioned? I mean, you're hiring freelance authors there, and if you pay the right price, they should be good, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of tricky because we have a lot of friends in that industry and we still use their services. So I said almost never, but we still occasionally have used their services. Usually it's when the end of the month is coming up. The writers I was managing haven't, met a deadline or something, and we need 10 articles to meet our goals. That's when I'll call up the content service people and say, hey, I need 10 articles. Can you guys take care of it? And the major strength of those services is that you can get a lot of content fast. And the ones that we use, and I won't name any names, even though I'm sure they would enjoy some promotion because I have problems with them as well. Mm-hmm. But the ones that we have used so far, and we're still trying out more, but the ones that we have used so far have been really professional. They have account managers who will email you or call you as much as you want to make sure that your order is up to your specifications. They have a really large pool of writers that can handle really large volumes. And a lot of that stuff is really great. And they do it at an industry standard price, which for us is about $20 per 1,000 words. The problem, though, is that even with all of those systems in place and all of those resources at your disposal, the writing has never been great. So the best writing I've ever gotten from a content service like that is basically B+. Mm-hmm. Most of the time it's around B-, and that's not because I haven't tried to figure out a different system or process or a guideline document or talk to the account managers. I've done all of those things many, many, many times and experimented with many, many different things. And this is back when I was feeling like, if I can just push a button and order content, it would be fantastic. It's just that, the main problem, the reason why you are never going to get content as good as you can if you hire your own writer is because those writers just don't care about your project. And it kind of makes sense, right? So if you order content from a content service, you have to realize that that company is trying to offer you content for the same price you are already paying. And the industry standard right now is about $20 per 1,000 words, but they also have to make a profit. So they're not only employing writers, but the good ones are employing account managers. So that means that they have to make a profit on an industry standard price. So they can't pay the writers that money. There has to be a gap between that $20 mark and what they're paying the writers for that company to exist. So when you do that, you just can't hire the best writers. Plus, these writers are people who have just stacks and stacks and stacks of paper on their desk. Your project is just like one more thing to get through before they can go home at the end of the day. And they want it to be, or because of that, they want it to meet the minimum requirements so that they can be done and move on to the next thing. When you put all of that together, you get, quality of work that is okay, but it's never going to be authoritative. And that's the main problem with content services. And it's one of the reasons that you can't keep doing that at least on a large scale if you want to create an authoritative site.
Yep. No, that absolutely makes sense. Those are really good points. And, a lot of people out there have used those services. I've used those services and never really knew where to find other writers per se, or at least I never tried real hard. But you've come across a really great method for finding writers that's worked well in our business for our site. So why don't you tell people where you are finding writers and potentially where they could be finding great writers as well?
For sure, yeah. And I get asked this question a lot. It comes up a lot in the comments of Niche Pursuits. People email me about this. Where are you finding these writers? Especially when we started talking about our authority project, because we mentioned several times that we are adding like 3,500 words of authority content or content that we think is authoritative per day. So people are like, where are you finding all these writers, and what service are you using? And when I wrote the blog post, I said this is probably going to disappoint everybody, either because it's shockingly simple or some people feel like they don't have this resource. But I find all of my writers almost exclusively through my own social network. Usually it's on Facebook, but it could be anything. Your social network isn't just Facebook. Your social network is all of the people that you know.
Right.
So to give you an example, I have this list in the blog post of the types of people I have hired this way. So I've hired my dad's former assistant, my former philosophy professor's wife, Spencer's friend's wife, 2 of my former students, Spencer's uncle, a couple broke poets, and my own brother. So it's not like I have this crazy resource where, I happen to know a whole bunch of professional writers. I've hired lots of different people who happen to be good at writing.
Right.
And that's kind of how I like to do it. And there are a couple reasons that this works really, really, really well. So basically when I'm looking for a writer, I am looking for 4 main qualities. The first one is that I want to be able to communicate with them anytime I want. I want them to be fast. I want them to be dedicated to their project or, invested somehow, even if it's just because they know me and they don't want to have a tough conversation with me. And I want them to be adaptable. Aside from just speed, all of those things are really, really tough to get with content services, which is kind of what we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. They're very, very easy to get if you hire somebody you know. It's not going to happen every time, but if you hire somebody you already know, it's really, really easy. If you know them and you are connected via social media network, or they live down the street, or you have their phone number, you can communicate with them anytime you want. Usually because they know you, they're going to be much more invested in working with you to complete something because, they understand your work ethic, or they don't want to seem like a schmuck or whatever. And when you put all those things together, it makes the whole project much more adaptable. So that's my main strategy overall, is to find people that I know, and ask them to write for me, or sort of throw the hooks in the water on the social media networks and say, hey, I have this contract available for work. Are there any takers?
Yeah, no, it's a really great idea, and what I've found interesting as well, and is that a couple of people have approached me, even though I haven't, posted anything, other than people in my social network now know what I do for a living, and my dad's always blabbing to everybody about what I do at, wherever he comes across family or friends, and so just the fact that people know what I do, a couple of them have put two and two together and say, hey, he probably needs writers. And they've asked me, and that's how we found the two that you mentioned, my friend's wife and my uncle. I wasn't even looking for anybody. They just approached me and said, hey, I'm a writer. Can you use me?
Yeah, and that's happened to me too.
Yeah.
So one of the and like I was a writer trying to break into the writing profession for several years. So one of the things that people may not know about writers is that there are just many thousands of writers who are doing work for free just to build up a portfolio so that they can show that to an employer and get a job. Most writers will jump at the chance to earn $20 per 1,000 words, or especially new writers. And most of the writers I hire aren't very experienced writers, because, as you get more experience, you can command a higher price, and that's not a price that, we can pay right now, at least not for the volume of content we are producing. But most newer writers really love the idea of actually getting paid for their work. And when they're at the coffee shop and they have their laptop open and they're sitting across from a couple friends, they're like, hey, what are you working on? And they're like, oh, it's a writing contract for this website. It's pretty easy work. I do it in like a couple hours a day, and this is the contract amount. Those are the people who are going to email you next and say, hey, do you have any extra work? So once the machine gets rolling, there are going to be people who reach out for you. Or if you treat your writers well, which is another thing we're going to talk about, they will keep reaching out to you. So I have one writer in particular who emails me, once a week and says, hey, do you have any work? Do you have any work? Do you have any work? And that's the type of situation you want to be in, where someone has worked for you, they enjoyed it, they got paid well, and they keep coming back to ask you if you need more work. Because when that happens, you don't have to worry about services or outsourcing companies or interviewing people or, any of that nonsense at all, because the work's coming to you.
Yep, absolutely. And so I really do think that method of using your own social network will work for most people. It may not work for all people. There may be some people that for whatever reason, they're not able to find good writers. But you gave a list of at least a few other places where people can look. I just thought I'd run through those real quick. There's a subreddit on reddit.com. It's /for_hire.
R for hire.
R for hire. So people can check that out. There's, of course, Craigslist. You can go. There are good writers there, but you might have to kind of pick and choose. You're going to get a whole gamut of applicants, I'm sure. And then the Pro Blogger job board. You can find great writers there as well.
Yeah, and of those three, the subreddit's going to be your best bet. It's free. Everybody on there is going to be a college-educated, English-speaking person for the most part. And most of them have established portfolios. Of the three, aside from Pro Blogger is going to have obviously some career people, but R for Hire has career freelance writers trolling that board all the time, and it costs absolutely nothing to just post there. Pro Blogger costs like $50 to post a gig. So that sounds good. Let's go ahead and jump right into, once you actually find somebody that you want to work with, or you give them their first job or whatever, how do you actually go about managing the writers? Sure. Real quick though, just to take one step back, when I talk to a lot of my internet marketing colleagues, and they say, where do you find all these great writers? Which is a question those folks ask me a lot because we produce so much content and it's so good. And, like we don't share it with the world, but a lot of those folks see it every day or, every week or whenever I happen to talk to them. And I say, through my own social network. A lot of them well, I'm not on Facebook. And my response is always, why aren't you on Facebook? If you're an internet marketer, you should be taking part in all of these different internet communities and actively engaging with people, because that gives you resources and networking opportunities, and you can meet writers and you can meet business partners or wherever. So if you're an internet marketer and you're building websites and you're not on Facebook yet, then you should really wise up and at least use it casually, because that is how, it's a major factor in how I'm able to do this.
Yeah.
Is just being active in Facebook.
Yeah, whether or not people want to use it for social reasons, doesn't matter. I mean, for business reasons, it makes a lot of sense to be on Facebook or other places where you can connect with your social network. So, yep, I agree. People can get on there. It's their own fault if they're not.
Yeah, for sure. So, let's talk about actually managing the writers. I'll try not to ramble too long here because this is the bulk of it. So I'll try to break this down in a couple of different sections, I guess. But,
okay.
And please jump in wherever you feel like you should, because I feel like a lot of these are also how you manage me. So I'm sure you have some good tips here too. But
yep, I will indeed.
So the first thing I do is I provide a short, clear, simple set of guidelines in a short, clear, simple workflow. And to me, this is absolutely the most important thing. It's not the most important thing, but it's very important. I am of the mindset, and I've always been of the mindset, that the more instructions you give people, the harder something will seem. And when you're managing a writer, you have to realize that the single biggest obstacle for anybody writing anything is going to be facing the blank page before they start. So if you make it more daunting, that part is going to be much, much, much harder. By providing the simplest possible guidelines you can, in the simplest possible workflow you can, you drastically reduce that anxiety and you help them move through that batch of articles that you sent them much, much, much quicker. So when I say simple, I mean like very, very, very simple. And I have a template on the blog post. My email template when I send writers an assignment just has a date, a set of keywords, product article cheat sheet, which is basically like a short set of guidelines, and an example of a finished article. So I will send that email to them, and the template is only, 5 or 6 lines long. After that, I follow up with them on Facebook or however I'm connected with them, whether it's phone or GChat or whatever. And I say, do you understand this 100%? Are you uncomfortable at all? If they are, then I offer to let them send me a couple paragraphs just so I can look at it and give them a thumbs up. Or I say, if you're not comfortable with this yet, or if you don't understand something, let's just hop on Skype for 5 minutes. And usually that's all it takes. And after that, they're just good to go, So it's a very, very simple workflow with very, very simple guidelines. What I don't want to happen is for them to get a 2-page process doc or standard operating procedure or whatever and be like, holy crap, how am I don't even want to read this. How am I going to do this assignment, you know? And I try to reduce that as much as possible. When you do that, you have to be okay with some level of creative freedom, because if you give less guidelines, you're going to get different types of articles from different writers, and that's okay. And it may even mean that you're going to spend 10 or 15 minutes editing each article, but in the end, it's going to save you time and make you money because the writer is going to be happier and working a lot faster.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and just say that, this is a process. When you first hire somebody, of course, you're going to have to invest a little bit more time to kind of train them and make sure they understand what you want. So there is a little bit of back and forth, whether that's through Skype or GChat or whatever, right? And so, you do have to invest a little bit of time, but if you provide clear and simple instructions like Perrin mentioned, that training time, if you will, is drastically reduced. And when you think about hiring a freelance author, say going through Textbroker, each and every time you get a new article, it's a different person typically.
Yeah.
And so that gives you an idea of the amount of training or lack of training that person may get. And so you can never count on solid work that's sort of has any sort of consistency throughout all of your articles. And so the short amount of time that you might need to invest up front in having a steady author really pays dividends on the back end.
Yeah, 100%. Totally true. And this is something that we try to exercise in our own business too. Doug Cunnington over at Niche Site Project did a big post on project management and how different internet entrepreneurs handle their project management. And you and I both answered that post, but I mentioned that when we set out to do our weekly plan, we have one call. We, after that, write one email with 5 or 10 tasks that we need to get done, and that's it. We might chat and discuss throughout the week, back and forth with some stuff, but our workflow is one email, and I'm a really strong believer in that kind of management process. And if you can give somebody a very short guideline that they can follow and just do it, it makes it much easier on everybody.
Yeah, and maybe I'll jump in here and just talk about management overall of how you manage people. Perrin basically gave you exactly what we do each week. I mean, that's about it. Perrin's sitting in Chicago. I'm over in Washington State. There might even be days where, we don't talk hardly at all. But I know that Perrin's working because I trust him. We've had our weekly phone call and the list of tasks that need to be done. And so really it comes down to putting trust into people that you hire. You need to be able to just say, you know what, this is what needs to be done. Go do it. Give them the freedom to do it how they want to do it, even when they want to do it, within reason. Maybe there's a deadline, but whether they do it in the morning or at night or whenever doesn't matter. And so just the ability to hire well, have trust in people, and give them that autonomy to do it the way they want. Not only do you get the task done typically that you want, but the person doing the task is a lot happier because they have that freedom. And as I found with Perrin and with our writers, I get a lot of new ideas because I'm not micromanaging. Perrin thinks of ideas that he brings back to me and says, hey, maybe we should try this or try that. And I say, yeah, totally. That's a great idea that I never thought of. So there's a lot of great back and forth synergy, if you will. I hate that word, but there's a lot of it works well as a team when you give people the freedom to do their work.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people tend to fall into that death spiral of micromanagement because they're afraid of how things are getting done, and you have to be okay with some level of leeway. I mean, we have those tasks that we're going to get done every week. Some weeks they don't all get done, and then
right.
on the next week we'll say, hey, we didn't get this done and we didn't get this done, and here's a plan. Some weeks we get them done, we have extra time, and then we do more stuff. And like those are the weeks that we really feel like we're crushing it, But as a manager, you just kind of have to be okay with some weeks being fast, some weeks being slow, and things coming up or things not coming up, and having some more time. The upside, of course, is that when you give people that kind of freedom, they'll end up knocking stuff out of the park for you because they don't have to worry about you breathing down their neck. So I think this flows nicely into the other point that I was making. In fact, we're basically already talking about it. But
okay,
the other point that I made in the blog post was that to manage my writers, I train them really well, and then I give them as much autonomy as possible. So I front load all of my training, and then I just basically let them do their own thing. And that's kind of what we were talking about, is allowing your employees or your freelancers lots and lots of freedom. And I think the best way to describe the benefit of this is to kind of paint a picture of what you want your internet business to look like. For most of us, it is being able to push a button or send an email and know that that business is just growing on its own and you are thinking about other stuff, or the day-to-day minutia of that business is taking care of itself and you were thinking of higher level strategy stuff. If you give your writers or your employees lots of autonomy and they're trained well enough to give you confidence to do that, your business can grow on its own and you can take care of more important things. So for example, our authority site, we have a really great writer named Nina. And when we first hired her, it took us maybe a month to really get her articles to where we wanted them to get. So, these are big authority articles in a market that she wasn't familiar with at first. I just knew she was a great writer. And so it was, talking about sources and looking at the competition and thinking about how we wanted our articles to be better, and her bringing ideas to the table and looking over articles every single day and tweaking and refining and, asking questions, and me taking a day to think about a good answer for that question or whatever it is. But now we add 3,600 words of content or thereabouts every single day, and I don't see it at all. I just check her work at the end of the week, and that's it.
Yeah.
So now our site is growing by 15,000 words a week or more. And I'm not doing anything. I'm now focusing totally on promotion, and that's a really good spot to be in for your business, and that's what autonomy can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's maybe go ahead and move right on to the next point, which, let's see here. So we've talked about, we want to take great care of our writers. We want to keep them for as long as possible. And
so this is the contract one, the long contracts.
Yeah, offering them long contracts. So the benefit there is?
Yeah, so this is offering a longer contract is maybe my one and only truly secret sauce tip in this whole thing, because there's not a lot of people think about them. I think when most people are ordering content, they think of it in batches. They just want to get a batch of content and work with it, and then either let the site marinate or then go order another batch of content.
Mm-hmm.
My secret to finding and keeping better writers, and which basically for me means moving from a B+ writer to an A+ writer, is to offer long contracts. I don't want to scare people. That doesn't mean that you have to spend a bunch of money for a long contract. It might mean that you are offering $500 of work for the next 3 months, or if you're really on a budget, it might be $200 of work for the next 3 months, or whatever, which should be around the amount of money you could invest in a new site. $200 a month for 3 or 4 months should be, right up there. Or it might be like $1,500 of work for the next 6 months or a year. Whatever it is, if you can just make that contract longer, you will attract much better writers. And that's because freelancers are in this really weird position where they're constantly trolling for work. They're out there trying to find the next assignment to pay their bills. They need to eat and get money, and they have to be writing to do that. If you can offer them a steady paycheck, they're going to love that. So even if it's the same amount of money, you will attract much better writers if you can offer a long contract. The other benefit is, if you have someone working with you for several months, it allows you to train them better and offer them more autonomy so that that particular writer can take care of everything you need. And it even allows you to train them to post to the website, which is another set of training in itself, which is very important and saves you a lot of time in the long run. So offering long contracts is very, very important.
It really is. And, I'm just kind of listening to everything you say, and I'm basically agreeing. Yep. That's all very important. And we've covered a lot of things. And overall, I think the thought that maybe will hopefully be a takeaway for some people, certainly not all people, But some people will just be this mind shift of thinking of writing and managing writers as sort of a task rather than a core piece of your business.
Yeah.
These are real people, they're writing real content, and if you can motivate them to actually insert their personality and their thoughtfulness and all the resources that they have to really invest in your business, you've got another team player there rather than just somebody you're trying to get content out of as quickly as possible. So
Totally.
and I don't know what other main points you want to cover here. I know we've covered quite a bit, but maybe a final thought or two.
Sure, yeah. I do want to talk about taking care of your writers.
Yeah.
Because I think that is really vital to having somebody who wants to work with you for a long time. So we have one really fantastic writer for our main authority project, and I try really, really hard to take care of her. And there are just a couple things that I do to do that. The first thing is I track her time, and I make sure she's making a lot of money per hour. So she adds 3,600 words of content a day. For her, that takes her 3 or 4 hours, which means that she's getting paid a really high hourly rate. And that's really, really important because writing is tough. And if you do it fast, it can pay really well. If you don't do it fast, it doesn't pay well. So it's really important. I try to track that closely. Likewise, I try to give them bonuses when I can. Obviously, you can't do it every time, but if you can, it's nice, especially if they're doing a good job. I also just tell them they're doing a good job. So many people don't do this, but if someone's really like crushing it for you and writing great content for your website, it's going to make you money. You should be sure to tell them that they're doing an awesome job. It seems like common sense, but man, make sure you do that. And finally, if you do find a great writer, keep them at all costs. So we have a really fantastic writer for our authority project, and she knows that if that site takes off, and we are very confident that it will, one of the first things I'm going to do is try to argue with you about paying her more money,
For sure.
I mean, she's doing such a good job, and she's such a big part of that site that I would much prefer her to be making more money than me to make more money at this point. I mean, she's just doing so much. And she's taking care of so much of the work in 3 or 4 hours a day. She's just crushing it.
Yep, absolutely.
Basically, all that comes down to just taking care of your people, treating them like full-time employees, and making sure that they feel that way. And treating them like people instead of just a resource for your business. And that's how you're going to get the most value out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so critical. And again, it's just such a different thought process of the entire business, if you will, rather than just when I go to Text Broker and order content, I don't even know who writes the content. I don't even really look at the username. You know, I just think I hit this button and I get content back.
Yeah.
That's it. There's really no management process along the way other than some, I always put some initial instructions and I want it set up like this, but it's a totally different ball game when you're investing in a writer long term, and that's the way it should be, to really grow your business.
Yeah. So, what about you? Do you have any final thoughts on management and what's worked for you or what hasn't worked for you as an employee in the past or anything?
Yeah, I think we touched on all the main points. I will again just stress that when you believe in people and put your trust in them, you're going to get so much higher quality work than if you were sort of if you make your writers or your employees feel like you're kind of second guessing them, and you're always, every time they bring something back, you're only finding faults instead of praise. Even if there are some things that need to be fixed, always, and this is just sort of common interpersonal relations, I guess, you always try to have some positive things to say. Try to have a couple of positive points, and then if there is some things, some feedback you need to give, just have that as well and be upfront, but don't always be nitpicking every single detail.
Yeah.
As long as people are moving in the general direction and they're invested in your business, those things are going to work themselves out.
Yep, totally.
So
Totally get it.
that's sort of my final thoughts on everything. I don't know if there was anything else in the comments that came up that we haven't discussed, but again, we had some great discussion in the comments as well. So
Yeah, there's some good ones. There's the best ones were a couple freelance writers who showed up and said, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for, which was nice to have that affirmation that on the other side it seems like a good management process. And there's also the general feeling that people are shifting towards this kind of mindset too. And there are a lot of people who are still writing their own content and unsure about hiring writers, and there are some people who don't quite yet feel like they want to hire one writer for, the whole project or something. But in general, I feel like more people are shifting to this kind of mindset.
yeah, I agree, and it's a great way to go. I mean, Perrin and I have fully made the shift to, we're thinking about building real businesses. We're thinking about building big businesses, things that have the potential to, we even hate to say the numbers out loud, it's so much, but millions of dollars. I mean, those are the potential of the things that we hope to build, which is a really big difference than hoping to make, hey, maybe someday if I work for a couple of years, I might make $10,000 a month. You know, and don't get us wrong. I mean, anybody that's making $10,000 a month is doing really well, and that's a great income, more than anybody can make at their day job. But there's so much more potential out there when you build a real business, as I put that in quotation marks.
Yeah, totally.
But that's what we're going for, and in order to achieve that, you need writers. It's a critical ingredient to any online business, and the ability to manage them well, to hire them well, even just to find the right people. Those are all things that are so very, very important. So hopefully people listening to this podcast have been able to get some ideas that Perrin shared in his article, and just things that both of us agree on in general as far as management style and that sort of thing. So that's basically my final thoughts. Hopefully people can apply this in their business and take their business to the next level. So anything that you'd like to add? Any last words of wisdom?
No, but I think at some point we have to ask people to rate and review on iTunes. We haven't been doing that. And we have some nice reviews and ratings, but we want to hear what you guys think. Our podcast audience might not be the same as our blog audience. So let us know what you think of the podcast, and also please let us know if there's anything you want us to cover, because your feedback is super important.
It is. The feedback is so critical. I do get some emails every once in a while, more so than ever before in the history of the podcast in the past 6 months, of people emailing me and saying, hey, I love the podcast, appreciate that. But the feedback still, of course, and it's just the nature of a blog versus a podcast. I get a lot more feedback from my blog just because of the comments section and things like that. So if you're listening in out there, I want to hear from you. Go over to iTunes and leave a rating and a review. Perrin and I would love to see that. And of course, when you leave a review on iTunes, that helps other people find our podcast as well. So, great point there. So, once again, just thanks a lot for listening in, everybody. You can follow the blog over at nichepursuits.com. And the final plug from our sponsor, Longtail Pro. You can go over to longtailpro.com. That's the official sponsor, I just decided. So
That's true.
It is.
Anyways.
It is very true. This podcast probably would not exist if I did not have the Longtail Pro business going on as well. So go ahead and check out the free trial for the keyword research tool. But no, really overall, hopefully you picked up some great tips on hiring writers. We appreciate everybody listening in. Thanks a lot.